Hey, I'm some nobody, and about a month back I gathered up all my YouTube money out from under the bed and I took a little vacation. And I bet some of you are thinking, oh, I bet some nobody vacations in the Bahamas, or maybe he visited Japan. Nice as that would have been, no, I actually made a visit to the United States. Luckily my fur is white, so they welcomed me with open arms and even gave me a few jobs to take back home with me. I got them sitting on my desk right here. I went to the US to visit a friend of mine for a bit, but also to see all three of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies in theaters. Like many people, my friend included, I love all three of those movies and they mean a lot to me. Another movie I love that means a lot to me, James Gunn's Superman, which came out earlier this year. Pretty sure it was after Spider-Man 2 that me and my friend started talking hypothetically, if Sam Raimi were to direct a movie in the DCU, what character would we want to see him work with? For whatever it's worth, my first thought was Zatanna, but I couldn't tell you exactly why my first thought was Zatanna. But after a few rounds of me and my friend throwing names back and forth, I just came out and said it, Sam Raimi would fuck the shit out of a Batman movie. And I felt like an asshole for even saying it, cause plain and simple, Batman does not need a Sam Raimi directed movie. The character, the Batman, has like 3 different movies in the top 10 greatest comic book movies of all times list. I honestly hope Brave and the Bold sucks, because if it's good, that means Batman has 2 separate good live action adaptations running at the same time. And then he's got that Lego Arkham game coming next year and 2 more Arkham games in development as we speak. Fuck Batman, but I would love to see Sam Raimi make a Batman movie. Here's the first reason why.
Am I not supposed to have what I want? What I need?
Sam Raimi has a very visually distinct directing style. He's one of those directors whose movies you could very easily pick out of a police lineup, and I think a lot of that is owed to Sam Raimi's lifelong love of comic books. Comics are a medium that is all about the key visuals of a situation. If you got 6 panels on a page, that means you got 6 panels to sum up the entire scene. 6 images have to equal 100% of whatever you're trying to put on the page. And how Raimi's appreciation for that medium translates to his style of filmmaking is that he is a big visuals guy. Raimi is all about moments or images that you could theoretically snapshot and turn into a comic panel. One of the most iconic scenes he's ever filmed is all about this concept, the scene where Ash attaches a chainsaw where his hand used to be in Evil Dead 2. It's a series of quick cuts to easily readable, striking images. There's movement in each of these shots, but the way they're framed and the way they linger for just a second after the movement is completed adds an element of stillness to them. And I think that stillness is a big part of why Raimi is so good at creating memorable visuals. Like a comic book artist conveying as much as they can in a single panel, Raimi tries to convey as much as he can in a single frame. And across his filmography, you'll notice a lot of scenes where movement is secondary to the stillness. Scenes that have where the character or camera stops moving be more important than the act of moving to it, where the movement is just a quick snap to the imagery, like in Spider-Man 2 when Doc Ock realizes the inhibitor chip is busted. Or even later in that same scene where Otto steps over something with the arms and the camera comes in on him real close to get the image of him leaning against the steel beam. Raimi has other filmmaking techniques that definitely make his work stand out, but I think it's the comic book styling that would be the most important for a Raimi Batman movie, because believe it or not, Batman is a comic book character. A fact that really hasn't shown through in any live-action adaptation since the Tim Burton and Joel Schumacher movies. Now listen, I am not implying that Batman and Robin is better than Matt Reeves' The Batman, but I am saying that for the last 30 years in the realm of live-action adaptations, Batman has either been grounded and realistic or terribly mismanaged. Say what you want about the Batman from the 90s movies, you could believably see them going up against any of Batman's rogues and actually having a Robin. I couldn't picture Bale and Pattinson going up against Poison Ivy, but if you told me Tweedledee and Tweedledum were going to be in a third Joel Schumacher movie, I'd believe you. Saying you want a more fantastical Batman is a pretty common opinion these days, but I think in this specific instance, a fantastical Batman would pair great with Sam Raimi's style. Because Sam Raimi is a director that excels at those unique visuals and striking imagery I mentioned, and those are both so important to Batman and his villains. Batman is a character defined by striking imagery and turning himself into a symbol. Like, this might only make sense to me, but I think of the idea of a Sam Raimi Batman and I immediately think of Batman in the Blue. And his villains are all either showmen or monsters, where presentation means everything. I'll talk more about villains in a later section, but the general point of this section is that Sam Raimi's visual style is absolutely perfect for the type of Batman movie that I want. But you want to know what the most appetizing thought of this entire concept is to me? The idea of a Sam Raimi Gotham City. Over the years and across all the live-action Batman adaptations, I think Gotham has a pretty good track record. I think the only time Gotham has looked straight up bad in live action is that first Suicide Squad movie. And I'm sure one of those CW shows that really wanted to use Batman but wasn't allowed to probably had a worse looking Gotham. But it would feel like bullying to criticize creators on a TV budget for not being able to create a city out of thin air. I'm not a fan of Nolan's Gotham, but I don't think it looks bad, it's just a little too straight up New York for me. Gotham's got some New York in it, but it's also got some Chicago, some London, more gargoyles than any other city in the country. You got Wayne Enterprises single-handedly waging real estate war against a bunch of evil CEOs and supervillains looking to build lairs. You got multiple secret societies pulling the strings since the city was founded. A portal to hell under Arkham, Lazarus juice in the water and the soil, a literal god living under the city making people fucked up. None of that would make sense in Nolan's trilogy. I'm just trying to make the point that Gotham is a weird place. I love Burton, Schumacher's, and Reeves' versions of Gotham because they all manage to give it a unique energy. The reason a Sam Raimi Gotham interests me so much is that historically, Sam Raimi has always put his production designers to work, which is a coy way of saying that the locations in Raimi's movies look fucking cool. Obviously, you got the iconic cabin from the first two Evil Dead movies, you got all the medieval settings from Army of Darkness, you got the crazy looking land of Oz from Oz the Great and Powerful. Visually, Multiverse of Madness is an awesome movie, but most relevant to the discussion today is the work Raimi did with Neil Spisak and J. Michael Riva on the Spider-Man trilogy. Spisak was the production designer for Spider-Man 1 and 2 and the co-production designer on Spider-Man 3 with Riva. If you're unaware, the production designer is the person in charge of all the departments that make the movies look the way they do. The director of the movie tells the PD how they want it to look, and the PD brings in people that can make it happen. Visual effects, practical effects, sets, lightings, locations, anything you can see basically. I'm shouting Spisak and Riva out because I think one of the most underrated parts of Raimi's trilogy, a movie series that is not at all underrated, is Raimi's New York. It's a little hard to explain, but in those movies it is easily recognizable as New York while also feeling like more than just real life New York City. Like a comic book version of New York, a place you could believe a spider would man. And I'm sure a lot of that has to do with just how the movies look, with all three of them being very vibrant. But I think another big part of it is that it takes a lot of already iconic real life New York locations and adds on to them with either an equally iconic interior or something else. Like the Flatiron is a real building in New York that looks fucking crazy. It's shaped like a pizza slice, but in the Raimi trilogy, that's the Daily Bugle. Raimi uses a real-life iconic building as the exterior, but then makes the interior just as iconic. Times Square is one of the most famous places on the planet, but the only time it's featured in the Raimi trilogy is during the Oscorp World Unity Festival. So it's more than just Spider-Man and Green Goblin fight in Times Square, the actual festival is the battleground. And that sequence primarily focuses on a ledge Mary Jane's about to fall off that I'm not even sure is based on a real building in Times Square. Then you got the Osborn Penthouse, a place that's important in all three movies, and the exterior is a real building in New York, a rooftop mansion. An absolutely egregious bit of architecture and a real-life supervillain lair, so the interiors of the Osborn penthouse perfectly reflect that. Raimi focused on the wildest looking parts of New York City so that he could make sets that were even wilder. Him, Spissick, and Riva were going band for band with New York to see who could have the craziest looking places. You got the Columbia University lab, the wrestling arena, the Oscorp lab, Doc Ock's waterfront lair, the multi-layered subway tracks where Spider-Man and Sandman fight in Spider-Man 3. I see all this and I wonder, what does a Sam Raimi Batcave look like? Sam Raimi's Iceberg Lounge, Sam Raimi's Ace Chemicals, sewers where Killer Croc is lurking. Raimi just has that unique artistic vision that I think is instrumental to putting together a good Gotham City. Now hold on a minute, some nobody. Artistic vision and cool camera work are one thing, but Spider-Man and Batman are completely different characters. Do you really think Sam Raimi could handle such a dark, complex character? I mean, sure, why not? He did it before. This video now has a secondary purpose. If you have never seen Sam Raimi's Darkman from the year 1990, go watch it. But first, a quick history lesson for you. Almost 100 years ago in the year 1939, Batman was created. But before Batman, there was a character called the Shadow. Before Superman, there was a character called the Shadow. He predates Big Blue by about 8 years. The Shadow is like the Black Christmas to Superman and Batman's Halloween. He laid the groundwork of the superhero. You might have heard some people say as a little fun fact that in his first few appearances, Batman had no issue with killing criminals, and that's because he was modeled after the Shadow. And Batman's debut story was actually based on one of the Shadow's stories, Partners of Peril. Now me personally, I'm not a huge Shadow-aniac, but you know who is? Sam Raimi. Raimi has been trying to adapt the Shadow into a movie since pretty much the start of his career. And for various reasons, it's just never happened. But the first time he tried, it didn't happen because they wouldn't give him the rights, so he said, fuck it, I'll make my own. Darkman is pretty much an unofficial take on The Shadow. It started as a short story about a dude who could change his face to look like other people that was inspired by the classic Universal horror movies, and I wouldn't be surprised if Raimi wrote that as an homage to the Man of 1,000 Faces, Lon Chaney. Darkman as a movie is about a doctor named Peyton Westlake who's working on a synthetic skin treatment to help burn victims. Because of some information his attorney girlfriend has, some mobsters break into his lab. They beat the shit out of him, burn his arms to a crisp, dunk his head in acid, and blow him up. They just shoot his lab assistant. I don't know why they had to do all that to him. Peyton miraculously survives and as a John Doe receives an experimental treatment that means he can no longer feel pain. But without that physical stimulation, his emotions are all amplified and he has a constant adrenaline rush going because his body can't tell whether or not he's in danger. So he sets himself up a superhero lair and he plots revenge. And that's all I'm gonna say about the plot of Darkman, because I do want you guys to go out and watch it. It's a fantastic movie. It is a dark and tragic superhero movie with Liam Neeson giving, in my opinion, the best performance of his career. How does it relate to a potential Sam Raimi Batman? Well, like I mentioned earlier, Batman and Darkman share a lot of the same DNA. They're both men driven by tragedy and revenge to become something inhuman. Peyton became a monster, Bruce became a symbol. Neither option is a healthy way to cope with trauma, so they're both a bit unhinged. It's much more obvious with Darkman when we see him lose control and have to fight to hold on to his humanity, but you can't convince me the guy going out to break bones and crack skulls every night is mentally well. I really think tonally, Darkman parentheses movie is a perfect fit for Batman. So much so that I would say Darkman himself would be an amazing villain for Batman. He'd be like Hush if he was a good character. Speaking of Batman villains, the idea of Sam Raimi adapting a few of them is the second most appetizing thought of this whole discussion. For this next topic, I don't think I have to say that he probably does or he has one of. I think I can say with my whole chest that Batman has the most iconic rogues gallery of any superhero. If we're talking top 10 most popular comic book characters of all time, Batman is either 1 or 2 on the list, and he's the only character whose arch nemesis is also in that top 10. Lex might be on the list too, but let's be honest, he's got to fight through all the Marvel dudes and Batman's homeboys to get in there. And again, Batman's villains being so iconic might just be the fact that he gets so much shine compared to every other comic book character. Like Rocksteady puts out a game that doesn't do well, Warner Brothers will cancel a Wonder Woman game and shut down the studio that was making it just so the studio that makes Batman games can stick around. So of course people know more Batman villains than they know any other superheroes villains. But the reason they get shown that favor is anytime you put them up to bat against the Bat, Batman's villains deliver. There is such a wide variety to Batman's villains and the type of stories you can tell with them. You got your tragic, sympathetic ones like Two-Face, Harley Quinn, and Mr. Freeze. You got the over-the-top evil ones like Joker and Ra's al Ghul. You got ones that are comic booky but also realistically horrifying like Professor Pig, Victor Zsasz, or Calendar Man. Then you got the ones that are horrifying in a comic book sense like Scarecrow and Clayface. Batman could be tracking a serial killer in a grounded detective noir type story, and the next night he'll be fighting Condiment King. I think a big reason why so many talented creators are drawn to Batman across so many different mediums is just how versatile him and his villains are. Like, you ever look at Jim Carrey's Riddler and Paul Dano's Riddler and think to yourself, yeah, those are the same character. What does the versatility of Batman's villains have to do with Sam Raimi? Nothing yet, but let me explain. As a creative, there are 4 things that Sam Raimi absolutely loves. Comic books, which we've already gone over, The Three Stooges, which isn't really relevant here, Bruce Campbell, I could think of a few roles for him, and last but not least, horror. First movie Sam Raimi ever made was a horror movie with his buddy Bruce Campbell called Within the Woods, which was basically a prototype to The Evil Dead. Then of course he made The Evil Dead, which launched his career, and Evil Dead 2, which saved his career from being killed by Crime Wave. Movie I just talked about a few minutes ago, Darkman, has a lot of horror elements, scary moments, and is half The Shadow and half Universal horror movies like Phantom of the Opera or The Invisible Man. Outside directing, Sam Raimi has also produced a ton of horror movies like the first 2 The Grudge movies and 30 Days of Night. And of course, all 4 of the Marvel movies that Sam Raimi has directed have included some horror elements. The first Spider-Man has a fair few jump scares and a lot of really tense scenes. The second Spider-Man has the infamous hospital scene where the tentacles go on a rampage. The third Spider-Man has that bit of body horror when the Sandman is created. And then in Multiverse of Madness, I'd say Scarlet Witch is a straight up horror villain down to having a slasher style chase scene. I bring up Sam Raimi's penchant for horror because quite frankly there are a lot of Batman villains for whom horror would fit like a glove. There's quite a few of them where you don't gotta put in much effort to make them scary. Clayface is getting a horror movie next year, so I think the idea of Sam Raimi putting his horror talents towards a Batman villain is a pretty easy thing to conceptualize. But going back to Sam Raimi's appreciation of universal horror, he's very good at making his monsters sympathetic. Going back to Spider-Man 1, Norman and the Goblin have a very clearly Jekyll and Hyde inspired dynamic, where Norman is a victim to the Goblin rather than just being the Goblin. Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2, I think, is pretty clearly inspired by the Invisible Man, where a scientist makes this breakthrough that unfortunately drives him insane, goes on a bit of a rampage, and only in death can he be cured of his affliction. A lot of Batman's villains are pretty easy to sympathize with. Very few of them came out the womb evil and wanting to perform heinous deeds. A lot of them are victims of circumstance. Even the Joker at some point was just a normal gamer until society forced him to take a bath. Once me and my friend decided on Sam Raimi directing a Batman movie, this was the next topic we talked about: who should be the villain of said Batman movie. My take on it is that since Batman has been grounded and realistic for so long, we've only really gotten one side of his rogues gallery. The showman side of it: Joker, Riddler, Penguin, Scarecrow. But the monster side of it really hasn't been featured in a live-action movie since Batman and Robin with Mr. Freeze and Poison Ivy. Bane would usually be on the monster side, but Dark Knight Rises Bane is more of a showman. So I think this hypothetical movie should have a rogue from the more monstrous side of the gallery. First name that came to my mind was actually Poison Ivy, and not just so she can do the Evil Dead tree scene to Robin, but I think you could do a lot of very interesting stuff with her ability to control people through pheromones, play a little bit into that Evil Dead possession angle. My second thought was Killer Croc, because being a tragic monster is kind of his whole deal. Personally, I really like both depictions of Croc, whether he's an actual crocodile man or just a guy with a skin condition that society treated poorly. While I'm sure Raimi could do something really cool with Killer Croc, I think I'd actually rather see him in the Matt Reeves Batman movies. But I eventually arrived at a conclusion that I love so much it pisses me off it won't actually happen, and it's the reason I chose Arkham Knight as the background footage for this video. Let me just say this right off the bat, Man-Bat is cool. If you don't fuck with Man-Bat, I don't know what to tell you, you are not gonna make it in this world. Like, regardless of director, I would love to see this dude in live action with a good budget, but I do think Man-Bat is a pretty damn good fit for Sam Raimi. Man-Bat is a classic kind of monster. He's the type of monster that Sam Raimi loves doing because Raimi's done it at least 3 times. The scientist that inadvertently turns themselves into a monster. Darkman, Green Goblin, and Doc Ock are all very similar deals. But where Darkman is inspired by the Phantom of the Opera, Green Goblin is inspired by Jekyll and Hyde, and Doc Ock inspired by the Invisible Man, I envision a Sam Raimi Man-Bat as being inspired by the Wolfman. Maybe during the day, the Man-Bat reverts into Langstrom, and every night Kirk goes through the transformation, and the Man-Bat goes out on the hunt. So you'd have 2 stories going at the same time where Kirk Langstrom is trying to figure out what's happening to him and find a way to cure himself, and Batman is hunting this bat creature. And across his Spider-Man trilogy, one of the most important things to Raimi was to always keep the human element in mind. He never wanted Peter to get completely lost in Spider-Man. And I think using Man-Bat in this way opens up the potential for a great parallel between Batman and Man-Bat. The idea of this brilliant man losing himself every night to this horrific bat creature that terrorizes the city could be a mirror of sorts. Like, you could jump between scenes of Bruce during the day and Kirk during the day. Assuming there would be a good script and a great cast of actors, I think it could be really cool. Honestly, the idea of Tobey Maguire as Kirk Langstrom kind of speaks to me a little. And listen, I already know Bruce Campbell wants to come in for a cameo as Professor Pig. Sidebar, young Bruce Campbell would have made a great Two-Face. Now, I don't really have an ending plan for this video, so I think I'll finish it off by just saying, yeah, none of this is gonna happen.
Good shooting.